Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
And welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, allowing you to focus on living fully and living fully today, not 30 years from today. Very excited this week to share my friend, John Anderson, with you on the podcast. And welcome, first of all, John, to the Way to Wealth podcast.
Thank you, Scott. And it's been an enjoyable journey so far, and I look forward to another 40, 50 years in front of us.
I know that's your game. That's exactly right. We're just getting started. Our best half's in front of us is what you believe and lives. And I totally agree and embrace that. So with the audience, I'll just share a little bit. John's an entrepreneur, author, speaker, founder of Replace Retirement, hence why he said, looking forward to the next 40, 50 years. He's not a believer in retirement, nor am I. Since 40, his purpose has been to inspire and challenge leaders to achieve their greatest personal potential. And there's tons of wisdom John can share. Some of them, he has a process that I've been through called a legacy map, which ideally we'll get into some of this. But that said, John, if you don't mind, maybe just a little bit of your backstory, because certainly we know each other. My audience likely doesn't know you, so would love to hear just a little bit about your backstory and how we got to where we are today.
All right. Well, interesting enough, it all started with the Way to Wealth. And specifically in my case, as a young man, like all of us, I wanted to create financial security and create that for my children and family. And so I kind of looked around. I grew up in a upper middle class neighborhood, yet I saw people who were much wealthier than my father, who was a successful 37 years of the same company, draftsman to CEO. So I had a nice upbringing. And I thought, well, I'll just date wealthy girls and I'll marry well. And so I did. And I married one of the wealthiest families in Southeast Michigan. And that brought me to this sort of epiphany that at age 30, that I thought ringing the bell was all about money. And what I learned is it's not all about money. That's certainly an important component. It's one of the structures, but it's not the whole structure. And so that kind of created a journey that has been ongoing ever since, in terms of what are the things that really matter beyond just financial security and freedom.
Yeah.
And on that journey, started IBM out of college. At the time, IBM was the most profitable company in the world, and they'd never had a layoff. So my father was very pleased I was working there. Because of marrying into this family, I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My father-in-law helped me with that. At an office furniture dealership, it was a Hayworth dealer. There's Steelcase, Herman Miller, Hayworth are the big ones. Grew that from about 3 million to 15 million in sales. Still wasn't delivering, the full journey I was looking for. Sold that. And then because of Vern Harnish that we mentioned earlier, I attended a program that he facilitated called the Birthing of Giants at MIT in 1994. As a result of his influence, I came back and launched the Detroit chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization, or at that time it was called the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. So launched the Detroit chapter in 1996, and Vern was president at that time. Continued on my entrepreneurial journey. After selling the office furniture dealership, Vern approached me and said, why don't you be my first coach? I'm going to take this stuff we're doing at MIT on the road. We're going to call it, at that time, I think it was called the Master of Business Dynamics. And you can be the first coach. And so I was his first coach, literally sitting there in a room taking notes. That was sort of my orientation. And then after like the third day on the road together, he said, okay, you're trained, go get customers. And so that's really how my business coaching started. My partner and I have had that practice for over 25 years now. And then really around 2007, 2008, I realized that once companies have all the framework for business tools from a organization like Scaling Up or another coaching model, then the leader becomes the bottleneck. So I created my legacy map and tools subsequently to help the leader grow through, as well as myself. I mean, I use everything, it's not something I'm not practicing myself, to help them continue to have growth and myself to have growth. And so today in Replace Retirement, it's really taking that legacy map tool beyond just the CEO to leaders and those who are not ready to retire yet.
You mentioned the legacy map, which I've been through and love, John. Would you share a little bit about the legacy map, and then your idea of living daily by design using the legacy map? Would love to share with the audience a little bit more about the map.
Well, the map is not that unique. I mean, there's lots of great tools out there. You have similar tools. So, and the principles are quite sound in the sense that you have a lifetime plan. You have a 1-year plan that builds off the lifetime. You have quarterly targets, monthly focuses, down to weekly. We have a weekly triangle. It's sort of a weekly huddle almost like, and then finally daily activity. So all that is what everybody that's listening to this will be comfortable with. I would say some of the unique parts in the legacy map is that you do have to choose your lifetime age, which you and I were introduced to by Dan Sullivan when we started the Strategic Coach. And then it was sort of never discussed again. I really like that piece. And so I've taken that and really amped it up in terms of taking people through a kind of a perspective of what it looks like late in life, and how do you design that in a sense that you get a lot of energy from it. So you're not waning in your energy, you're actually growing in your energy. So spending more time than Dan did, because he had a lot to share with us, getting that properly put in your head, setting that number, and then that number becomes the building block of everything that comes after it. So even, in my own journey, it's like, okay, I want this financial wealth and so on, because I believe that would be the number one goal in my life. By looking, and initially I said 103, as I started to put that in my subconscious and start living that every day, I'm like, well, geez, my lifestyle is not going to get me to 103. Even some of my thinking is not going to get me to 103. I'm not sure the people I hang around with are going to get me to 103. And so everything starts to roll out from that. And again, it's part of our relationship, right? We both have that like mindset. And so you want to hang around people that you want to mature like. So that was a big factor. And then again, using business coaching tools in the sense that let's meet every week and make sure we're being consistent on this. One of the unique things there is I realized through experimentation, accountability works better when it's a triangle rather than just one-on-one. So if you and I set up a meeting and then, oh, you can't make it, and hey, I got to miss this week, then it goes out the window. With 3 people, it's more likely to stick. And I've got a triangle tomorrow morning at 8:30. Sure enough, one of the guys is missing, but the other one will be there. So you have this stickiness where it keeps, we keep that consistency that we want. And then the way this 30-minute meeting is scheduled, part of it is sort of focused on what do we want to accomplish in the next 30 days. Again, classic business tools. If you want to get stuff done, you got to get it on your calendar and prioritize it. That part is what we're all familiar with. The part we're not familiar with that I include also is what's your purpose? So you got to say it out loud. I help people come up with their purpose. So you mentioned mine's to inspire and challenge leaders to achieve their greatest personal potential. So it's not just something that's on a piece of paper. It's something I'm embodying. I'm saying it every week over and over, really owning it. And then how are you going to live that in the next 7 days? That's one of the questions. So very forward focused. And then the same thing with reading. Scott, what are you reading? You share that. How are we going to use that in the next 7 days? So we know leaders are readers. But so much, that was a big wake up point at one stage. Like, I've read, everybody's like, oh, you've read everything. You're so well read. Well, if you read all your life, you're going to be well read, right? It's the Elon Musk thing. He apparently read every book in the library at age 12. Well, no wonder he's so wicked smart. I wish I started at 12, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So anyhow, well read, but am I applying that knowledge? So every week, again, what are you reading? How can you apply that in the next 7 days? So it's this. You got the accountability, which is so important, but in this model of a triangle, there's something special in the 3. We know that. 2, let's talk about who you're becoming, your new identity, and speak to that every week. And then back to what's right in front of you. We still got to take care of the day to day. We can't let that go. So again, trying to find tools and behaviors to move us in the direction we want to go, or essentially change our identity. So every week I'm rewriting the script. We're rewriting the script of who we intend to become, not who we are in the past. And I'll take a little sidetrack on that. Ari Weinswig is somebody we both admire. Ari taught me the power of visioning. He's written a number of fabulous books, and he talks about the power of beliefs. So as I let that soak in, it was a fantastic book, but I came to the realization that 80% of what I believe are not my beliefs. They're my parents' beliefs. Yeah. They're beliefs from my upbringing. They're beliefs from my peer groups. But those beliefs may not serve who John is today or who John intends to become in the future. So now I have to be using tools, techniques, and so on to start rechanging these beliefs. So I'm becoming the person I wrote about at 103, not the one in my past. And that's another, so legacy map is quite rich in terms of what's happening, but on the surface, it's another sort of life planning tool, if you will. More the way you
That's great. So that triangle idea, that's actually the first time I either heard that from you or that I remember. Let's put it that way. So I made note of that. That's a great takeaway for anyone listening, just in meetings. The power of the triangle, the power of the number 3 and why is a great takeaway. The other thing that I was going to ask you, and I learned this is one of the cool things about having a podcast, is you get to really meet and interview some interesting people. And I talked to a guy, Jay Hughes, who's really a retired estate planning attorney. I don't know Jay's age, but he would consider himself an elder in age, but he's clearly an elder, and I would call him a sage. This guy's just full of wisdom. And he said, Scott, one question that I like to ask, because I don't ask about the weather. I don't ask about, small talk anymore. He said, because I don't know how much time I have left. So I really want things to be meaningful. He said, so the question I like to ask, but I said, no, but I'm all ears. He said, I'd like to ask, and I'll ask this to you, John. What has become clear, or what have you gotten clear on since the last time we both spoke?
Well, there's all kinds of things, but I've got the first answer that comes to my mind. This dynamic of having a compelling future, right? So you and I have always operated that way. Again, give Dan some credit and others in terms of Vern's the same thing. So whether you call it a BHAG or the lifetime, whatever. So I want to wake up every morning inspired and have that compelling future. So we're wired that way. The second one, this is the big sort of changes so that gives me energy, correct? And it helps me grow. But if I don't get energy from our conversation today, if this isn't as equally inspiring, then I've wasted the day. So this dichotomy of both sort of present and having, focus in the future, and then both have to deliver. So as I'm maturing, there are things. I had a great meeting with a group of guys last night. We're creating the Exponential Investment Fund. So we're talking about how to design it and the core values and all the things you do when you get together. But my premise in that with these guys, I'm like, every meeting has to be like this. Like, we've got to enjoy our time together. Otherwise, we're putting the wrong priority up front. The fund is just a vehicle. It should be financially lucrative and everything else, but it's a vehicle for us to spend time together, share ideas, challenge one another's beliefs, and grow. And so everything's back in that context. So that's it's both. Right now, this better be a good use of my time, because it may be the last day I get. And at the same time, I need to be excited about tomorrow. Otherwise, I could start that slippery slope down.
Yeah, I love that. That's so well said, John. Thanks for sharing. Then look, the way to wealth is broken down. The way is the Taoist philosophy of being in harmony with all things and living in the present moment, because that's all we got. And that's, you mentioned your purpose. Mine is real simple: to serve. And the point behind that is every moment presents itself for you to serve it. So being able to come from a place of being whole and complete within yourself, where you don't need anything from the situation, then you can show up in service to see, how can I make this moment better and have this meeting and this person be glad that they spent this time because it made their day and that moment better. So that's my purpose to serve. So I love all of that. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is, and this piece is new to me, so I'm curious to hear more about it, but the collision of the digital age, which we've spoken about before, and the human body sine wave dynamics. That's new to me. So I would love to hear the connection in your dialogue about that.
Well, you segued beautifully, and we didn't plan it this way, but when you used harmony, that's sort of what we're going for here. So if I'll kind of play it out this way, and again, this is a thought that's still developing, and part of the reason why I'm scheduling time with Ari and the meeting with Mark Devine and others is and Stephen Kotler's on my list. I want to discuss this with them also, other people who I admire and are thought leaders and so on. Okay, so it comes down to this, is that I realize that everything in nature operates on a sine wave. It's analog. So the rhythms of the season, our sleep cycles, a woman's menstrual cycle, everything is in nature has that. And I even did some Googling on it, and that's the universe is that. So it's all that. Then along comes this device, which is digital. It's ones and zeros. It's on or it's off. There is no wave. So to use your word harmony, if you have a wave that's going like this, and sometimes it's erratic, fair enough, because our lives are like that way, and it hits 1 or 0, how does it possibly get in harmony? Now, I don't think it can. And I think that's part of the reason people struggle so much today is if this is starting your day and ending your day, how would you ever get in harmony? So practices that you utilize and I do, so I wake up in the morning, I look at the phone simply to see if anything's been canceled, not to read emails, and again, 1 in 30 times that's going to happen, but just to make sure nothing, okay. Then it's put away for the next 2 hours. It's out of sight, and then it's meditating and praying and exercising and reading and journaling, all intended to get me into harmony, gratitude, personal notes of appreciation, all these devices to get harmony again, so that when I launch into the day, into things that I don't have control over, right? Because I have control over that time, I'm more likely to stay in harmony. And then again, to Dan's credit, he taught us so much. If it's a quote focus day, when I'm supposed to be client facing, then that technology needs to stay away until later in the day. Even on breaks, I don't look at my phone. I don't look at the phone at lunch. I don't let that device break me out of the harmony that these clients have brought me in for. I'm supposed to be helping them to get in harmony. How can I get them in harmony if I'm not in harmony myself? So that's this digital analog thing. And again, I'm speaking to others to kind of vet out their sort of reaction to that. It makes a lot of sense. And, Ari writes so much about nature. And it's the same thing. I don't know if we were at that same conference down at the Fortune Summit when we used to meet down there, when Jay Harmon, who wrote The Shark's Paintbrush, talked about biomimicry, that everything in nature that man solved is by duplicating nature. So the Wright brothers were able to get a plane to fly by watching what birds did. So again, back to, nature has this harmony. Well, then there obviously there's something to that. And so I'm leaning back into trying to understand how does John get in harmony? And then in that harmony, how do I get into harmony and relationships and everything else? I'll take that piece one step further, kind of a fun one. So everybody do a date night, right? Date night. Everybody, yeah, you got to do a date night. Okay. And why do you want to do date night? Because your wife, in our case, a wife, whoever the significant other is, says, honey, I love when we were dating. I felt so special. I was the center of your world and everything. And I'd like to get that back again. Okay. So here's how we started. We decided that date night is not going to be a night. It's going to be breakfast on Sunday morning. That seemed to be the right time, the right container for us, right? And to create the container. So, and I'm going to say it in 3 years, so it makes the story more interesting. I'm not saying it's exactly 3 years. The first 12 months was it's date it's breakfast with Molly on Sunday, and I gotta show up. It's what I should do. It's what a good husband does. It's more like duty than it was like this amazing thing, right? That's kind of year one. Year two, it's now become kind of a ritual. I'm actually looking forward to it. It's very natural to tell people, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't do that on Sunday because Sunday is breakfast with Molly. So now it's transitioning to something I'm enjoying. She's enjoying. Sometimes there's other couples there. You don't do it every week, but it's consistency. Like I don't want to miss it because I'm starting to enjoy it. I'm not even sure why. Year three, the breakthrough happens. We're at breakfast one morning and Molly says, I just want to thank you for this. I've never felt more loved, more valued. I feel just like we're dating again. You pulled it off, kind of thing. And I'm start crying. I didn't do anything. I don't know how we got here, but I sure appreciate it. And so I'm in this exact same place, tears running in a restaurant. Why? Because we found this way to get our relationship into harmony. How do we do that? Not with technology. We had to go break bread. We had to create that safe container. And part of that container is we know we're going to have more intimate conversations in that space than we would when we come in at the end of the day or something, a impromptu dinner or whatever. And so it's back to trying to start to look at everything through that lens. All part of stuff we learn, right? There's a rhythm, right? Vern taught us rhythm. Okay, how do I get in rhythm in everything?
You talk harmony for sure. And I had mentioned it earlier. And another word for that I've been talking about a lot recently, the last year and a half, has been flow. No force, just flow, like getting in the flow of things. And that's what nature does, harmony and flow. And how to do that? Well, morning routine, right? Without technology, so that you have the time and space to get in that natural flow and natural rhythm so that you can show up and be present and you can lift the moment in front of you. And when you think about, this is the Way to Wealth podcast. So everyone's, all right, how are we going to make money? Well, yeah, it's peace. And clearly it's what we talk about. And what do people really want? So it's interesting because I learned this from Michael Singer. And that was actually, I think Vern might introduce the book, The Surrender Experiment, years ago. Gosh, I went down the deep dive with this. I love this guy's stuff. I've read everything that he's put out, all the way back to his books he wrote in the 70s, his first books, the Seeking for Truth or something like that. And there's 2 of them. And all of his stuff I read or listened to at least twice. Just absolutely love it. And the point of it is, his main premise is, what do we all really want? You think you want a trip to Hawaii, or you think you want $1 billion, or you think you want a plane, or you think you want a new relationship, or you think you want to get married, or you think you want a kid. You just want what you think that's going to make you feel. Mm-hmm. What we want to feel is happy, joyful, whole, and complete, and good. And so what was so interesting, Jay Hughes taught me this as well. As an attorney, very astute and in depth with language and the English language. And the definition, original word wealth, is we all, W-E-O-L. And Anglo-Saxon definition, or the definition of that Anglo-Saxon we all word, which is wealth, equals well-being. So wealth equals well-being. I'm like, I knew it. I've been trying to say this in a different way all these years. So I said, Jay, I'm going to use that. Can I take it from you? He says, you're not taking it from me. That was gifted to me intuitively. It's not mine. So use it. I'm like, beautiful. How well said is that? So the thing on nature, that's been my rabbit hole recently for a while that I've been going down, as you know, because we talked about it and we're going to set a time to spend more time talking about it. So I've really been thinking deeply about several things. So what's become clear to me is the Infinite Entrepreneur is my latest technology, and I'll call it a download. And that is Way to Wealth's a piece of it. But it's this, how do we become an infinite entrepreneur? Well, legato, which is how do we create family values, what I call 4 Ps of a sustainable business, which is part Vern stuff, part Dan, all these different best practices that I made into my 4 Ps. And then Way to Wealth is the finance piece. And then healthy, wealthy, wise, and happy. So this infinity symbol, flow, harmony. Well, the point of all that is 2 things. One, it's making the money clean, which is what I feel like we need to do. And it's making the invisible visible. So when we're clear on our personal and family values, then we can get clear on our company values. Because you said it before, as Ari says, our beliefs are made up from what? It's not our beliefs. Let's really make sure we have ours. Then our companies, with those things in place, once we get to the money, we vote with our dollars. So how can we make sure we're congruent with what we're buying at this grocery, supermarket, anything we're buying, and especially how we're investing our money? It should align with what we believe, and it needs to be what we believe, and we're voting with our dollars, so that needs to be aligned. So the only other comment I'll make, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is so that's what's becoming clear to me, those two things. And how does nature tie to all of this? Well, first of all, flow and harmony. Yep. And second, what does nature do? Nature is in harmony and flow. Well, what does that mean? A tree, an animal, plants, birds, yes, they take care of themselves knowing they have to survive. And it's always about the good of the whole, because without the whole, they can't survive. So it's reciprocal. So when I'm thinking about money or business, it's now always like nature, reciprocal. How does this benefit the greater whole? And with that, and now it's back to my purpose, my personal purpose, to show up to serve, period. With that, you actually do better, because that's what nature does. It's reciprocal, like oxygen. We breathe in oxygen, make carbon dioxide, and breathe out. The plants take that carbon dioxide, turn it back into oxygen that we can then breathe in. I'll pause there, and that's what's become clear to me in the last 6 months.
It's fantastic. And, there's so many things that are kind of bouncing through my mind as you're sharing that. One, I think of kind of the Maslow hierarchy, right? So that you have to go from sort of safety and security to self-esteem to self-actualization. And so maybe part of the maturity journey and kind of rising up that thing is that by design is that we do need to slow down or will be slowed down, so that we simply, we sort of take it all in, right? We smell the roses, if you will, that you have this realization. Or as Stephen Covey eloquently did, right? He talked about dependent, independent, interdependent. So what you were suggesting in your sharing was, okay, so animals have independent existence that are interdependent by design. So they don't even know that, they're just simply being independent, but there is this interdependence. And again, because they're not making judgments and so on, there isn't all the fear and various things that are driving our thinking.
And so to your point, either slow down or you're going to likely be slowed down. And I really think there's something to that, to have time, space, and margin in your life, to be intentional, to be in harmony, and to be like nature, which is to be present and in the moment and taking it all in. So again, you can be clear to show up and interact with the flow of things as they are, versus you needing to take something and extract from it, which is not what nature does. It's always showing up to be interrelated and the symbiotic relationship.
Well, then that's you. So you triggered the sort of third thought that I was struggling with there a minute ago. The other piece that I've been, again, you and I think very parallel, is that I wanted congruency between my head and my heart. I think you used a term like that. So when I create the quiet time, when I have that morning reflection or taking a walk in the woods, anything, right? Again, nature can really be kind of a door opener to this. Then I tend to think more from my heart. When you're on a mountain, right? And this is beautiful. That's not your head so much speaking, it's your heart saying, this is beautiful. And I'm so grateful to be here in the Colorado Rockies, right? On this beautiful day. Okay. So the heart speaking. But a lot of our business and, much of this, again, as a young man and taking care of the financial thing, that was my head speaking, not my heart. I didn't know how to even listen. I didn't know how to have a conversation with my heart. And maybe back to Maslow's thing, because I still was dependent on my family and so on. And I can't think about interdependent. So then we go on a journey of maturity and business and careers. And so now we're independent. We can take care of ourselves. Oh, I got that bar on my sleeve kind of thing. And so the natural order would then say, don't stall there, right? Be interdependent, because that's kind of, I think, the final resting piece is, and you talked about this earlier also on relationships. This was another kind of aha that's obvious when I say it, but this idea that, okay, so the first thing that happens when we're born is we're in relationship with our mother, right? There's that love, and it's all kind of circling around that. So that's the most important thing in your life is your mother. Nothing matters more. Fair enough. And the mother, in contrast, treats the baby the same way, right? So this beautiful union, if you will. Okay. Then you go through life and you're on your deathbed. And all you want are a few close relationships around you. That's it. Money doesn't matter. Health doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Just those relationships. So if we start in a relationship, we finish in a relationship, perhaps this relationship thing along the journey is also incredibly important. And so back to sort of this long relationship we've had that's matured and cultivated and evolved and so on, came back from that sort of instinctual need as, hey, I want to be in a relationship with this person. I'm willing to invest time in order to do that. And I don't want to lose that. And I think, again, it wasn't an intentional part of a plan that I put together, but it's clearly raised. Matter of fact, even in the legacy map, I have people prioritize. So what's number one? What's number two? What's number three? And I give them kind of categories. And so the top three are always spiritual, health, or relationships in some order. Fair enough. Yeah. And if you're not spiritual, then health and relationships. So this always happens. But then I started to think about, in spiritual, number one for me, and I know it's important for you. So then it's like, well, so isn't that just a relationship with God? So maybe relationships really are number one, and then there's specific relationships underneath that. So maybe spirituality isn't sort of an entity in its own anymore. It's just one more super important relationship. So I haven't rewritten the book or done anything with that, but that's, and Vern and I are working on something together right now, and I'm kind of theming in on that, and he liked it too. It's like, I think there's something, because he and I have that, right? 27-year relationship. And that was a piece, and you know that in my background is part of the reason I'm so close with my ex-wife and this family that has money and all that is because I put the relationship before I put money. I was not going to lose that relationship. So I wasn't going to wrestle for money and all this sort of stuff. It wasn't about that. And so with Vern, it's been that way. It's like I've always put relationship first. And so far, it's paid huge dividends. So I'm going to kind of stick with it for the rest of my life. Not that I haven't been, we all get burned by a couple of relationships.
Well, of course, but I'll comment on that because I want to make sure and honor that and say that I see that, John. That is definitely something that I recognize what a good job you've done with that, not for the benefits that come from it, just because you have, that you've just done a good job nurturing and honoring relationships. So I want to make sure and point that out because that's kudos. That's so important. And gosh, think of nature. It's what it does. There's a interrelationship, and that's what it does. It recognizes the relationship. So I think there's a tie in there. And the other thing that I think it ties into that I was going to ask you is a little bit about customer intimacy, which is relationship. So I think it would be applicable to say, what does customer intimacy mean? And what would you want to share about that?
I wrote a blog on this recently. It's on our website. It should be up. I write a newsletter about my dog, right? So it's all lessons I learned from Jack, my dog. And so it's been very popular. It gets a lot of opens because lots of dog lovers in our demographic. And then secondly, it's not really John speaking, it's the dog speaking, and then what I learned from him. And so it went essentially like this, is that if you're Amazon, if you're not Amazon, let's kind of do that. If you're not Amazon, fast, reasonably, it's not the cheapest, but it's certainly, a competitor, and painless. So painless, right? So if you want to be fast, cheap, and painless transaction, then you got to be like Amazon, because even, it's funny, like my stepkids, Amazon's bad, but they're ordering from Amazon. Like, I'm a stockholder, so I'm not going along for this thing. I do buy from them. Okay. So that's the one model. The only thing that's left for us is customer intimacy. So it's this whole idea of how do I create more and more intimacy with my clients? And specifically, I'm looking for clients who value customer intimacy. So it's certainly a relationship we have. And I just did my review with Scott Toms, and, kind of evolving into that is that I like the team, I like the people, I trust them, and so on. And so I'm putting high value on that. And so it's very hard for someone to come in and pull that out. No, you don't understand. This is my friend. This is, we share things. And so that intimacy is that, that I think that for our part of the market and so on is critical. So then what are all the steps that continue to drive that level of intimacy? And that was really my piece is, and then to your point, since I'm already kind of wired for relationships, that also is not something I have to fake. It comes quite normal and naturally. And so that's essentially that is, I don't know. And we know even like, the most profitable car company in the world is Porsche. Well, what does Porsche have? They have customer intimacy. It's not they're not making it's the whole phenomenon that goes along with that car. And by the way, it holds its value, right? If you buy a Porsche today, it's probably going to hold its value. If you bought a Porsche 25 years ago, it's holding their value. So they're not about big, they're about intimacy. And so that's the fork in the road I'm on is intimacy. They're great guys that execute on the other one, but
yeah,
I don't think I can do both.
I agree. It reminds me of an article I read the whole way back, I think in the 90s, John, called the 3 value drivers or 3 value disciplines. And it was operational excellence, product leadership, and customer intimacy. So you can think through those. Clearly Amazon's operational excellence, Apple likely would have been product leadership, and then Nordstrom, customer intimacy as an example. And the point of the article is exactly what you're saying. You can't do all 3. You got to master one. Now, maybe the best of the best of the best master one, then they start working to master 2, but that's like a super rarity. Focus in on one. And I think you made a great point. Who are you? And knowing who you are with your, Dan Sullivan would call unique abilities, other would call genius, other would say God-given gifts, whatever you want to call it, your unique DNA sequence you've been made. What is it that you bring that's unique, and where does that fit in those? So that's really good info. So if someone wanted to read more about your blog, or let's just even say specifically this customer intimacy, where this is on, how would they get that?
So www.replaceretirement.com. And then, there's pics there and you can see blogs. And then we also have info@replaceretirement.com. And if you send something there, I'll sign you up for the newsletter. And again, it's only bi-monthly because I know there's lots of stuff out there to read, but it's been consistent on this theme with Jack and lessons from Jack. One of them kind of on this intimacy. The reason why I weave the two together is I state something to the fact that, when Jack gets up in the morning, he doesn't check his phone. He's all excited, right, to see us. And when you're talking to him, he's like, oh, wait a minute, I got to take this call, right? Because you're the most important thing, that relationship. And so my dogs figured this out, that the worst thing you can do is to ignore it. It's like, oh, sorry, Scott, I got to take this. You would never do that. And of course, you love them. And again, so animals understand this. By the way, this is kind of another rabbit hole, but I told Peter Diamandis after one of our conferences, what we need to do with AI? We need to have golden retrievers train AI. That's where they get their modeling from. If they do it with humans, it'll be the Terminator. But if you did it with a golden retriever, AI is like, how can I serve you today? You're looking great. And it would just be this I've been waiting all day for you to come home. Let's get dinner going. And So anyway.
Yeah, you walk out the front door and back in, and oh my gosh, I can't believe you're back. Yes, animals have plenty to teach.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, John, 2 questions I always like to ask. One is transitioning to money as we work towards wrap it up, is what would be your earliest childhood memory growing up of money?
And you planted this question, and this was the first thought. Obviously, there's lots of relationships with money, and I had mentioned, growing up, that being in a wealthy neighborhood, and how do I live on that side of the street, kind of thing. But this one's a little. This really hit me. My father served in World War II. GI generation. My mother's family, they were in Saskatchewan, Canada, so a small town, and they owned the general store. And apparently, I don't know all the specifics and details, but when the Depression came, they lost the store. So she probably went from living quite comfortably and maybe a wealthier person in this very small town to then being in trouble. So that fear of money and that what would have been a traumatic event as a young girl, right? She carried her whole life and then passed on to her children. So I'm the youngest of three. With my oldest sister, she's been extremely frugal with her money. She's, good saver, a lot like my dad, just never extravagant, modest home. They're still living in the same house they raised their kids in. I think they bought it for $70,000. It's in Montreal. And they're still in that little house, which obviously is paid off years and years ago and so on. Okay. So she's very conservative. My middle sister is the middle sister. So, her own relationship and so on. But for me, that was passed on, that kind of fear or anxiety or whatever it was, that I'm like, I'm going to be rich. Like I've got to have this security. I realized later in maturity is that was her fear. It wasn't my fear. What I've experienced, and you alluded to, I've always lived in abundance. Money has always flowed to me. I got to work and produce and create value and so on, but I certainly don't lose sleep about it. And that was one of the, in divorcing Cindy and walking away from a billionaire and having to sort of start on my own, there was a lot of that kind of the one voice saying, "Are you a freaking idiot?" And the other, some of my friends too, like, "What are you doing?" Even she was like, I don't understand this. And the other one saying, "No, I got to take the road less traveled." And so in order to do that, I had to say, I'm not going to be fearful of money. I'm going to assume that it continues to flow to me, and it has. So that was the thing, is that I really, back to that beliefs. It was my mother's belief that you needed all this financial security in order to have life security, to be full. And I was able to sort of leave that behind. So
that's interesting. It even could potentially have been, you mentioned marrying into a wealthy family, and that you thought about that. And it could have been the whole way back from that being a part of it that you got from your mom, or why, hey, we need to take care of this. And then kudos to you to say, wait a minute, is this really my belief, or what am I supposed to do? And you took the road less traveled to go on your own. So kudos to you. But I always like to ask that question because I want people thinking about, are we living congruent? Because these patterns are formed at an early age around all of life, but specifically money being one of those. And, let's just recognize it and then break that pattern. And the good news is, I think when some of these trauma/patterns that are broken can break it for generations to come, which how cool is that? We actually pass on something different to the next generation, ideally, when we're able to break the pattern.
And let me add one little piece that kind of story. So Cindy and I talked about this, my ex, and we were married, and I said, part of the reason I married you was for your money. And she said, that's fine, and I know that, but you have to understand, part of the reason I married you is because you know how to make money. So it was a two-way deal here, that if my father lost everything, some of the wealthy kids that I could have married didn't necessarily know how to pull their own weight. And I knew we would always be comfortable because of your work ethic and, and so she said, it goes both ways. There was security for me also, because I knew we would never starve, and we do reasonably well, maybe not, flying around in private jets and stuff. But so anyway, I wanted to
Beautiful.
Fill that.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. The other question I always like to ask John is, what's the one or best piece of money advice that you have heard or learned that you would want to share with the audience?
Well, this comes back to, I'm very fond of my ex-wife and their family, and still close with them. So my father-in-law, so you have various mentors in your life. My father was a mentor for a while, and my father-in-law was a mentor for a while. So when I was starting the entrepreneurs the chapter, we had like 12 members, and we had no money, and so we're trying to create content, right? It's the early startup days. And so I asked my father-in-law, would you come in and speak? Now, he's very humble. He and his brothers, very humble family. So that's not something he necessarily likes to do, but he's also very, he said, if flying. So we bring him in, and this is 25 years ago or whatever. So I'm sort of remembering the way I remember. And obviously he shared some ideas, but this was sort of the takeaway. He said, I've got I think sort of two pieces of advice. One is, he said that my brothers and I have always avoided leverage, and there's a price to pay in that. So by really being careful and having our properly funded business, we couldn't necessarily grow as fast as some others in the real estate industry. But he said, if you look over your lifetime, when you're an old man and you look down the street, if you avoid leverage and you just keep kind of, you'll be the wealthiest guy in the street. Because that sort of save your money and stuff. And they're a family that always lived well below their means. So even though they're wealthy, I mean, for instance, he wouldn't fly in his private jet by himself. If he'd just take Delta, that's just silly. So he had these sort of behaviors that he role modeled and so on. So that was the first thing, avoid leverage. And then the second one was modest growth. He said, my brothers and I kind of coupled to that. We don't grow for 50% a year. And again, it's just a sort of modest, sort of a 20% or 18% kind of growth year after year after year. And, it's the whole compound interest thing. So he was really big into that idea that, you let it compound. And of course, there are generations, right? So it was father and then him, and now it's in the third generation. And it's a classic, Jim Collins flywheel thing where it's just got so much momentum now. It just lives on itself. But that was good. It was this conservative thing. Because everybody's like, oh, they're so successful and so on. And that wasn't, I think, what guys want to hear. It's like, because at whatever time that was, it's like, yeah, lots of leverage and grow fast and,
avoid leverage and modest growth, huh? Yeah. What's cool about that, John, is circling the whole way back to our earlier conversation, is that's like nature. Think long term. Yeah. Think of a tree. And if you look at the rings of a tree, like that growth, they're so slow. And then it gets to a certain age and it's exponential. And that's what happens with modest growth. It's nothing, it's boring, it's boring, it's boring. And then you're 30. Oh, that modest 3%, 4%, whatever it is, return on this number is frigging huge. And so that's exactly how nature rolls as well. So
I love the tree analogy. Of course, we go further. That interdepends, right? It's taking all care of, it's helping the other roots and the systems of other trees. It's, nurturing the ground. It's a place for animals. It ties back to everything. First, it's independent, just trying to not fall down. And then to your point, then it becomes this powerhouse, an elegant, humble powerhouse, by the way. And it really is a great metaphor. So
that's and it's impressive, like that he's remained humble to be able to do that. So beautiful, man. Thank you for being on, John. Great catching up. This was just like one of our normal conversations, by the way, as you well know. So just fun to share and learn and share. And people looking to find more information is at replaceretirement.com. Is that the best place for people to find out more about you, John?
Yeah, you can either go to info@replaceretirement.com. And obviously the website is replaceretirement.com. And of course, you can email me at john@replaceretirement.com. So any one of those vehicles, I read the info. Obviously, I read my own mail. And then the website has downloads and tools, and the book is available from us, or there's an Audible. So
I was going to recommend that. If you didn't say it, great book. I've read it, obviously, but couldn't recommend it more. So definitely pick up a copy of the book, gang. And thanks again for joining. I know we'll talk soon, and hopefully do a run back here at some point and have you back on to talk even more about nature and the economy is what I'm up to. So maybe we can talk more about that. But thanks for joining, John. And audience, catch you next week for another rundown of the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, allowing you to focus on living fully and doing it now. Catch you all next week.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Legato family is not affiliated with Cetera Advisor Networks LLC or CWM LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.